I still remember the weight of that ceremonial crown, white flowers woven with silver thread, pressing into my temples like a promise I never wanted to make. The scent of moon lilies hung heavy in the air as I walked toward him, toward the man who would end one war and begin another inside my heart. They say an alpha king's gaze can strip you bare, reveal every secret you've tried to hide. But when Draven Blackthorn's silver eyes met mine across that sacred stone, I felt nothing but cold assessment. No recognition, no warmth, only calculation. I was to be the sacrifice, my life for my pack's safety, my freedom for their peace, until he spoke that single word that changed everything. No. One syllable, and my world shattered. Not because I wanted him, but because in rejecting me, he took my sister instead. Punishment for a betrayal that wasn't mine to bear. I fled that night, leaving behind the shards of my dignity and the hollow ache that began in my chest, an emptiness that followed me through forests and mountains, through seasons and storms, an emptiness I never understood, until now. The goddess has a cruel sense of humor. She binds enemies with unbreakable threads, weaves fate from vengeance, and plants love in the most barren soil. They say an alpha finds his true mate only once in a lifetime. They never say what happens when he throws her away. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. The ceremonial robe weighed heavily on Lyra's shoulders as she stood before the ornate mirror in her preparation chamber. Delicate silver embroidery adorned the midnight blue fabric, stars and moons interwoven with the ancient symbols of both packs. Her mother's attendants fussed around her, adjusting the ceremonial crown of white flowers nestled atop her dark hair. "Hold still, Lady Lyra," one of them chided gently, securing another pearl pin. "The Alpha King values perfection." Lyra swallowed the bitter laugh threatening to escape her lips. Draven Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, valued many things: power, loyalty, vengeance, but she doubted perfection in a bride ranked among them. This marriage was nothing but a strategic alliance, a treaty signed in blood and sealed with reluctant vows. "You look beautiful," her mother whispered, appearing behind her with reddened eyes. "Your father would have been proud." Lyra nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. Her father had negotiated this peace treaty from his deathbed 6 months ago. The Moonstone Pack would finally end decades of bloody conflict with the Blackthorn Pack through this union, her sacrifice for hundreds of lives. "Is he—" Lyra began, then cleared her throat. "Has the Alpha King arrived?" Her mother's reflection tensed slightly. "Hours ago. He brought quite the entourage." Of course he did. The fearsome king would want witnesses to his conquest. Stories of Draven Blackthorn's ruthlessness had reached even their secluded valleys. How he had single-handedly unified the 7 northern packs under his rule, crushing resistance with brutal efficiency. Some whispered he'd never lost a challenge, that he could shift into a wolf twice the size of any other alpha. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. "It's time," came the deep voice of her uncle, now acting alpha until her marriage was complete. The walk to the ceremonial grounds passed in a blur of faces, her packmates watching with a mixture of sympathy and relief. None would meet her eyes directly. They knew what she was giving up for them. The clearing had been transformed with hundreds of lanterns hanging from the ancient oaks, their light dancing like fireflies in the early evening. 2 distinct groups stood on either side of a central aisle, her people in blues and silvers, and the northern visitors in black and crimson. The tension between them was palpable. Centuries of hatred temporarily suspended for this occasion. Lyra's steps faltered when she finally saw him. Draven Blackthorn stood on the ceremonial stone, taller than any man present, his broad shoulders draped in a cloak as black as the midnight sky. Unlike the elaborate formal wear of his entourage, his attire was deceptively simple: black pants and shirt beneath the cloak, with only a silver chain bearing his pack's symbol to mark his status. But it was his face that made her breath catch. Sharp angles framed features that might have been considered beautiful, if not for their cold hardness. His jaw was clenched, eyes, an unnatural silver gray, scanning the crowd with predatory focus. When they landed on her, Lyra felt physically struck by the intensity of his gaze. There was no warmth there, no curiosity, only calculation. The ceremonial drums began to pound in rhythm with her heart as she approached. Her uncle guided her forward, his grip tight on her arm. Whether to support her or prevent her escape, she couldn't tell. "Alpha King," her uncle said, bowing deeply. "We present Lyra Moonstone, daughter of our fallen Alpha, to fulfill the terms of our alliance." Draven's gaze slid over her with such detachment that Lyra felt a chill despite the warm summer evening. He said nothing, merely nodding once. The elder priestess stepped forward, her ancient voice carrying across the suddenly silent clearing. "Tonight, under the watching eye of the Mother Moon, we bind these two souls, these two packs, in sacred union." Lyra forced herself to breathe as the ritual began. The priestess bound their hands with silver cord, reciting blessings in the old tongue. Draven's hand was warm, but utterly unyielding in hers. "With this union," the priestess continued, "old grievances shall be buried, blood debts forgiven, territories respected. Alpha King Draven of Blackthorn Pack, do you accept this bond, pledging protection and partnership to Lyra of Moonstone Pack?" The clearing fell utterly silent. Lyra felt every pair of eyes watching them, the weight of generations of conflict hanging on this moment. Draven's silver eyes locked with hers, and for one heartbeat, Lyra thought she glimpsed something beyond the coldness, something like pain or fury, quickly masked. "No." The single word fell like a stone into still water. Lyra blinked, certain she had misheard, but the ripple of shocked murmurs through the crowd confirmed it. "I reject this union," Draven said, his voice deep and controlled despite the bomb he was detonating. He pulled his hand from hers, snapping the ceremonial cord. A collective gasp rose from the Moonstone Pack, while his people remained eerily silent, as though they'd expected this. "The terms of our agreement were clear," Draven continued, addressing her uncle but looking directly at Lyra. "I was to marry the daughter of Alpha Samuel Moonstone. She stands before you," Lyra's mother cried, pushing forward. "My daughter—" "No," Draven's voice cut through her words like a blade. "Samuel Moonstone had 2 daughters. Ice flooded Lyra's veins. This couldn't be happening. "Where?" Draven said, each word precise and deadly. "Is Sarah Moonstone?" And the name of her estranged sister hung in the air like a curse. Sarah, who had fled their pack 5 years ago after a bitter fight with their father. Sarah, who had sworn never to return. "My king," one of Draven's advisors stepped forward, his voice hushed yet carrying. "We've found her." All heads turned as the crowd parted, and 4 of Draven's guards escorted a woman forward. Despite the 5 years that had passed, Lyra would have recognized her sister anywhere. The same dark hair, though cut short now. The same proud posture, though her clothes were travel-worn. Her sister's eyes, so like her own, widened in shock upon seeing Lyra on the ceremonial stone. "Sarah?" Lyra whispered, her voice breaking. But her sister's attention was already fixed on Draven, her expression a complex mixture of hatred and something else Lyra couldn't name. "You found me," Sarah said flatly. "Congratulations." Draven's face transformed, a cruel smile spreading across his features. "The true daughter promised to me. The one who fled rather than fulfill her duty." Understanding dawned on Lyra with sickening clarity. Somehow Draven had discovered that their father had originally promised Sarah to him, not Lyra. But after Sarah's departure, the treaty had been rewritten with Lyra's name, a detail apparently kept from the Alpha King. "You can't possibly expect," Lyra's uncle began. "I expect exactly what was promised," Draven interrupted. "And I will have it." He strode forward, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her toward the ceremonial stone. Her sister struggled against his grip but couldn't break free. "I refuse," Sarah spat. "You don't have that right," Draven replied coldly. "Your father signed you away before your birth. A blood oath cannot be broken, even by your cowardice." "Then I'll fight you," Sarah challenged, her eyes flashing gold, the sign of her wolf rising to the surface. Draven laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "You're welcome to try, after we're mated." He turned to the priestess, who stood frozen in shock. "Continue the ceremony, with the correct bride." "This is madness," Lyra protested, finding her voice at last. "You can't force—" "I can do whatever I wish," Draven said, his eyes meeting hers with cold satisfaction. "Perhaps you should have considered that before your family attempted to deceive me. We didn't—" "Silence." His command carried alpha compulsion, making Lyra's next words die in her throat. "This alliance will proceed, but on my terms. Sarah Moonstone will become my mate, as was originally agreed. He turned to address the stunned gathering. The terms of the peace treaty remain. The Moonstone Pack will retain their territory and autonomy under my protection. But let this serve as a lesson to all. His gaze swept over Lyra's people, about the consequence of deception. What followed was a mockery of the sacred ceremony. Sarah, held firmly in Draven's grip, refused to speak the ritual words. But it didn't matter. Under pack law, her father's blood oath superseded her consent. The priestess, visibly distressed, performed the bare minimum required to make the union binding. Lyra stood frozen at the edge of the stone, the ceremonial crown slipping from her hair as tears blurred her vision. Not for her lost position. She'd never wanted to be queen, but for her sister, forced into a loveless political match by a vengeful king. When the priestess reluctantly pronounced them mated by law, if not yet by bond, Draven turned to Lyra with that same cruel smile. "Thank you for your hospitality, almost queen," he said, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "I trust you'll adjust well to your unexpected freedom." Something hot and fierce rose in Lyra's chest at his mocking tone. Perhaps it was the shock, or the public humiliation, but caution deserted her. "You think this is victory?" she whispered back. "Forcing someone who hates you to be your mate?" Something flickered in his silver eyes. "Hate is a strong foundation, far stronger than the false diplomatic pleasantries you would have offered." Before she could respond, he turned away, addressing the crowd. "We depart immediately for Blackthorn territory. The Moonstone representatives will follow tomorrow to finalize the alliance details." Chaos erupted as Draven's entourage moved with military precision, surrounding him and Sarah. Lyra's packmates crowded forward, protests rising, but Draven's guards formed an impenetrable barrier. The last glimpse Lyra had of her sister was her pale face looking back as Draven led her away, surrounded by his warriors. That night, as the Moonstone Pack reeled from the disastrous ceremony, Lyra stood alone in her chamber, the rejected ceremonial robe pooled at her feet. "I'll find a way to help her," she promised the empty room, her hands clenched into fists. "Whatever it takes. But first, she needed to disappear. She couldn't face her pack after such humiliation, couldn't bear their pitying glances, the whispers that would follow her, the rejected almost queen. Gathering only what she could carry, Lyra slipped from the pack house under cover of darkness. She would make her own way now, and somehow, someday, she would make Draven Blackthorn regret the day he had looked at her with such cold dismissal. What she didn't yet understand was the strange hollow ache that had begun in her chest the moment he'd turned away from her, an ache that seemed to grow with each step she took away from the ceremonial grounds. By dawn, Lyra Moonstone had vanished into the wilderness, leaving behind everything she had ever known, driven by a pain she couldn't name and a promise she intended to keep. 1 year later, the northern trading post bustled with activity despite the early hour. Merchants shouted prices, travelers haggled over supplies, and pack members from across the territories mingled in this rare neutral ground. Lyra pulled her worn hood lower over her face as she navigated the crowded marketplace. The disguise was probably unnecessary. Her own mother might not recognize her now. Gone was the sheltered pack princess with flowing hair and ceremonial robes. In her place stood a leaner, harder woman with cropped hair, dyed a nondescript brown, dressed in practical traveler's clothes stained with the dust of a dozen territories. "2 silvers for information," she murmured to the old woman selling herbs at the corner stall, her regular contact for news of the packs. The herb seller didn't look up from sorting dried lavender. "Plenty of gossip today." "What kind are you after, traveler?" "Blackthorn territory." The old woman's hand stilled momentarily. "Dangerous interests you have." Lyra placed the coins on the rough wooden counter. "Just information." With a subtle nod, the herb seller pushed a bundle of dried mint toward her. "Queen Sarah has fled the Blackthorn fortress. Again. 3rd time this year." Lyra's heart skipped. "When?" 3 nights passed. "King's guards dragged her back yesterday morning." The old woman's voice dropped further. "But that's not the interesting part. The Alpha King himself has fallen ill." This was new. In a year of collecting scraps of information about her sister's situation, Lyra had never heard anything suggesting Draven Blackthorn could be vulnerable. "Ill? How?" The herb seller shrugged. "None can say for certain. Some whisper poison, though none would dare attempt it. Others say a wasting sickness. His strength fails him, bit by bit. Started around the time he took his queen. A strange tightness gripped Lyra's chest at these words. The same hollow ache she'd carried since the ceremony suddenly sharpened, as if responding to the mention of Draven's condition. "Is he expected to recover?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice neutral. "The king searches for a cure with increasing desperation. Rumor has it he's summoned healers from every territory." The herb seller's roomy eyes narrowed, including a renowned healer from the Eastern Mountains, one who specializes in rare ailments that resist conventional medicine. Lyra stilled. The Eastern Mountains had been her home for the past year. And the renowned healer? When do they expect this healer to arrive? She asked carefully. "That's worth another silver, I think." Lyra wordlessly placed another coin on the counter. The healer was summoned 3 days ago, expected to arrive at Blackthorn Fortress by tomorrow's nightfall. The old woman gathered the coins. "Strange coincidence, you arriving today of all days." "Very strange," Lyra agreed, her mind racing. "Thank you for the mint." She turned away, pulse pounding. This changed everything. For a year she'd been building a new life, working as an apprentice to Elena, the very healer the Alpha King had now summoned. Lyra had discovered a natural talent for healing, her wolf's senses allowing her to detect imbalances others missed. It had become more than just a convenient disguise. It had become a calling, and now Draven had unwittingly summoned her right back to his doorstep. "Bad news?" a deep voice asked, as a large figure fell into step beside her. Lyra relaxed slightly at the familiar presence. "Complicated news, Raymond." Ray, a packless wolf who worked security at the trading post, had become her closest friend during her monthly visits. Nearly 7 feet of muscle with a deceptively gentle nature, he was the only person in the territories who knew her true identity. "Your sister?" he asked quietly as they made their way through the crowd. "Partially." Lyra guided them toward a quieter alley where they could speak privately. Once away from the bustle, she explained what she'd learned. Ray let out a low whistle. "The goddess works in mysterious ways." "This isn't divine intervention," Lyra countered. "It's terrible timing. Or perfect timing." Ray leaned against the rough stone wall. "You've spent a year hiding and gathering information, with no plan to actually help your sister. Now you have a legitimate way into the fortress. I can't just walk in there, Ray. Elena was supposed to make this journey, not me. And, conveniently, Elena broke her leg 3 days ago, and needs someone to go in her place." Ray raised an eyebrow. "Someone trained in her methods, carrying her seal." Lyra paced the narrow alley. "You think I planned this? That I somehow orchestrated the Alpha King's illness and my mentor's injury? Of course not." Ray's expression softened. "But I do think the universe is offering you the chance you've been waiting for." She stopped pacing, the reality of the opportunity sinking in. "If I'm discovered, you'll be protected by healers' rights. Even the Alpha King must respect the ancient laws of sanctuary for healers. Draven Blackthorn respects nothing but power," Lyra said bitterly. Ray studied her face. "There's something else, something you're not saying." Lyra hesitated. She had never told anyone about the strange emptiness that had plagued her since the failed ceremony, the hollow ache that sometimes flared into physical pain without warning. At first, she'd attributed it to trauma and displacement, but as months passed and it only intensified, she'd begun to suspect something more was at work. "It's nothing," she said finally. "Just nerves." Ray clearly didn't believe her but didn't press. "What will you do?" Lyra took a deep breath. "What choice do I have? I need to see Sarah, to make sure she's safe. If Draven is truly ill, this might be her best chance for freedom. Or yours for revenge," Ray suggested quietly. The thought had already crossed her mind. If the mighty Alpha King was weakened. "I'm a healer now," she reminded him, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. "I've sworn to do no harm, even to the man who humiliated you and imprisoned your sister." Lyra didn't answer. The conflicting desires within her, to heal and to hurt, had become her constant companions. "I should leave immediately if I'm to reach the fortress by tomorrow night," she said instead. Ray nodded. "I'll accompany you." "You can't. A packless wolf at the Alpha King's fortress would raise too many questions. And a lone female healer traveling through disputed territories raises none?" Ray countered. "I've managed on my own for a year. And I've worried every time you've left the trading post." Ray's expression grew serious. "Let me at least get you safely to Blackthorn Lands. I'll turn back at the border." Lyra wanted to refuse. She'd grown fiercely independent during her year of solitude, but practicality won out. The territories between here and Blackthorn lands were indeed dangerous, especially for a lone traveler carrying valuable healing supplies. Fine. To the border only. 4 hours later, they were deep in the forest that separated the neutral trading post from Blackthorn territory. They traveled swiftly, both in human form, but with wolves' endurance, stopping only when necessary. Lyra's mind raced faster than her feet, planning and discarding strategies for once she arrived at the fortress. "You should shift when we get closer to the border," Ray said, as they paused by a stream to refill their water skins. "Your wolf might be recognized." "I've thought of that," Lyra replied. "I'll have to stay human. My scent has changed enough this past year that I doubt anyone would connect me to the girl from the ceremony." Ray looked skeptical. "Scents don't change that fundamentally." "Mine did." Lyra didn't elaborate on how the stress and heartbreak of that night had triggered something within her, altering her scent to something sharper, wilder. Elena had commented on it when they first met, saying Lyra smelled more like the mountain pines than pack. They continued in companionable silence until dusk fell. As they made camp in a small clearing, Ray finally asked the question Lyra had been dreading. "What will you do if he recognizes you?" Lyra stared into the small fire they'd built. "He won't. He barely looked at me that night." "If you say so." Ray's tone made it clear he thought she was underestimating the Alpha King. "And your sister? What will you do if she gives you away?" "Miss Sarah wouldn't betray me. The sister who hasn't seen you in 6 years. Who might be desperate enough to trade information for better treatment?" Lyra winced. Ray had a point. She couldn't predict how Sarah might react after a year as Draven's reluctant queen. "I'll have to risk it," she said finally. "I need to know she's safe. That she hasn't been—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Ray's expression softened. "From what I've heard, the Alpha King is many things, but he's never been accused of physically abusing women. Manipulative, ruthless, power-hungry, yes, but not that." "Small comfort," Lyra muttered, though she felt a strange relief at his words. "Get some rest," Ray said. "I'll take first watch." Lyra nodded gratefully, settling onto her bedroll, but sleep eluded her, as her mind conjured images of the fortress that awaited her, and its master. Would Draven truly be as ill as rumors suggested? And why did the thought bring her such conflicting emotions? The hollow ache in her chest pulsed, as it had with increasing frequency as they traveled northward. Lyra pressed her palm against her sternum, willing the sensation away. She needed to be clear-headed and focused for what lay ahead, not distracted by phantom pains. Tomorrow, she would enter the den of the wolf who had rejected her, and this time, she would be the one with the power to heal or harm. Blackthorn Fortress rose from the northern forest, like something born of stone and shadow, rather than built by mortal hands. Its massive walls of dark granite stretched toward the sky, watchtowers at each corner manned by guards whose silhouettes were visible even from the forest's edge. "Are you sure about this?" Ray asked as they observed from a hidden vantage point. "Once you're inside those walls, I'm sure." Lyra adjusted the healer's satchel slung across her body, heavy with medicines and Elena's official seal. "Remember, if I don't return to the trading post within 14 days, I tell Elena everything, and we come up with a rescue plan," Ray finished. "Though what good I'll be against an entire pack of royal guards, I don't know." Lyra squeezed his arm. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." With a final nod of farewell, she stepped from the cover of the trees and onto the main road leading to the fortress gates. The weight of Ray's concerned gaze followed her, until she rounded a bend in the road. As she approached the gates, Lyra adopted the confident stride Elena had taught her, the walk of someone who expected doors to open and orders to be obeyed. A healer's authority was second only to an alpha's, according to the old traditions. Whether Draven Blackthorn honored those traditions remained to be seen. 2 guards stepped forward as she neared, their hands resting casually on weapons. "Halt!" the taller one commanded. "State your business." Lyra raised her chin. "I am Lena, apprentice to healer Elena of the Eastern Mountains. I come at the summons of your Alpha King." The guards exchanged glances. "We were told to expect the healer herself," the second guard said suspiciously. Lyra withdrew a sealed parchment from her satchel, bearing Elena's distinctive mark. "My mentor suffered an injury and could not make the journey. She has sent me in her stead, with all her knowledge and remedies." The first guard took the parchment, breaking the seal and scanning its contents. His expression remained skeptical, but he nodded to his companion. "Wait here," the second guard said, before disappearing through a small side entrance. Lyra stood perfectly still, fighting the instinct to fidget under the remaining guard's scrutiny. Her heart thundered against her ribs, but she kept her breathing steady, her face a mask of professional indifference. After what seemed like an eternity, the side door opened again, and a woman emerged. Unlike the guards in their utilitarian leather and metal, she wore flowing robes of deep crimson embroidered with the blackthorn symbol in black thread. Her silver-streaked hair was elaborately braided, and the cool assessment in her dark eyes spoke of significant authority. "I am Mara, Beta and advisor to the Alpha King," she announced without preamble. "You claim to represent healer Elena?" Lyra bowed her head respectfully. "I am her apprentice, trained in all her methods." She regrets being unable to attend the Alpha King personally, but assures him her knowledge flows through my hands. Mara studied her for a long moment. "You're younger than I expected. Age and skill are often unrelated in healing arts," Lyra replied, channeling Elena's no-nonsense attitude. A hint of approval flickered across Mara's face. "Indeed. Come. The Alpha King's condition has worsened since we sent for your mentor. There is no time to waste." The massive gates swung open, revealing a bustling courtyard beyond. Lyra followed Mara inside, acutely aware of curious glances from pack members going about their daily tasks. The fortress was even more impressive from within, a small city unto itself, with training grounds, stables, workshops, and multiple stone buildings arranged around a central keep that rose like a mountain peak above all else. "The royal residence," Mara explained, following Lyra's gaze to the central structure. "You'll be taken there once you've been properly prepared." "Prepared?" Lyra asked as Mara led her toward a smaller building near the keep. "Cleansed, changed, and briefed on protocol," Mara clarified. "No one approaches the Alpha King carrying the dust and scents of the outside world." The implications were clear. They would be watching for any hint of threat or deception. Lyra's pulse quickened, but she nodded as if this were perfectly reasonable. Inside the preparation chamber, female attendants waited with steaming water, clean robes, and solemn expressions. Mara gave brief instructions before leaving Lyra in their care. What followed was a thorough but efficient process. Lyra was asked to remove her travel-worn clothes and wash in herb-infused water that would neutralize any foreign scents. Her satchel of medicines was respectfully examined, each container opened and its contents verified against the list Elena had provided. Finally, she was given a simple robe of deep blue, the traditional color of healers in the Northern Territories. Through it all, Lyra maintained her composure, answering questions about her training and Elena's methods with carefully prepared responses. But beneath the calm facade, anxiety churned. She was about to face Draven Blackthorn again, the man who had rejected her, taken her sister, and upended her entire life. And somewhere in this massive fortress, Sarah was living her own nightmare. "The healer is prepared," one of the attendants announced as they finished securing Lyra's robe with a silver cord. Mara reappeared, her expression even more grave than before. "Come, the Alpha King awaits." The walk through the central keep was a blur of stone corridors, guarded doors, and respectful nods from pack members who stepped aside as they passed. Lyra focused on maintaining steady breathing and a confident posture, even as the hollow ache in her chest intensified with each step deeper into the fortress. By the time they reached a massive door flanked by 4 elite guards, the ache had transformed into a strange pressure, almost like an invisible thread pulling her forward. Mara paused, turning to Lyra with a searching gaze. "Before you enter, you should understand something. The Alpha King's condition is unusual. Multiple healers have examined him and found no physical cause for his decline. If Elena sent you because she suspected something beyond conventional medicine, she was right." Lyra fought to keep her expression neutral. "My mentor believed your message hinted at a soul sickness rather than a bodily one." "Perhaps," Mara said carefully. "What we know is that our king grows weaker by the day, though he fights it with all his considerable strength. His wolf is restless, his sleep disturbed by dreams he refuses to discuss." She hesitated, and the onset coincided exactly with his mating ceremony 1 year ago. The implication hung in the air between them. Lyra had studied enough about werewolf biology during her apprenticeship to understand what Mara was suggesting, but it was impossible. Draven and Sarah's mating had been forced, loveless, hardly the foundation for a soul bond that could cause such symptoms if strained. No. The thought that flashed through Lyra's mind was too absurd to consider. "I will do everything in my power to help him," she said instead, the words feeling strange on her tongue. Mara nodded once, then signaled to the guards. The massive doors swung open, revealing a spacious chamber beyond. Lyra steeled herself and stepped inside. The Alpha King's private quarters were not what she had expected. Instead of ostentatious luxury, the space was austere, almost Spartan. A large fireplace dominated one wall, its flames casting dancing shadows across stone walls adorned with weapons and maps rather than tapestries. The furniture was solid and functional. A desk covered in documents, several chairs, bookshelves laden with leather-bound volumes, and in the center of it all, standing with his back to the door as he gazed out a large window, was Draven Blackthorn. Even from behind, Lyra recognized the broad shoulders and proud posture that had so intimidated her a year ago. But something was different. A slight tension in his stance, perhaps, or a barely perceptible unsteadiness. "Leave us," he commanded without turning, his deep voice sending an unexpected shiver down Lyra's spine. Mara hesitated. "My king, protocol suggests." "Out." The single word carried such authority that Mara immediately bowed and retreated, closing the doors behind her. For several heartbeats, silence reigned in the chamber. Lyra remained just inside the door, her healer's satchel clutched in suddenly trembling hands. The hollow ache in her chest had transformed into a pulsing warmth that spread through her limbs, both foreign and strangely familiar. Finally, Draven turned. Lyra barely suppressed a gasp. The Alpha King's legendary beauty remained, but it was now haunted by something that made him appear almost mortal. Shadows beneath his silver eyes spoke of sleepless nights. His face, still perfectly structured, had a gauntness that hadn't been there before. And though he stood tall and imposing, Lyra's healer's eye detected the slight tremor in his hands, quickly hidden as he crossed his arms. "So," he said, his gaze sweeping over her with cold assessment. "Elena sends a girl to cure the Alpha King." Lyra dropped into a practiced bow, using the moment to compose herself. "My mentor believes I have the skills required, Alpha King." "And what skills would those be?" He moved toward her with predatory grace that belied his apparent weakness. "What special talents do you possess that 5 other healers lacked?" His proximity sent a strange heat coursing through her veins. Lyra fought to maintain her professional demeanor, grateful for the scent-neutralizing herbs that would mask any emotional response. "I specialize in ailments of the spirit, Your Majesty. When conventional medicine fails, the cause often lies beyond the physical body." Draven's eyes narrowed. "You believe I suffer from a spiritual ailment? I cannot diagnose without a proper examination," Lyra replied carefully. A humorless smile curved his lips. "Diplomatic, but ultimately useless if you cannot cure what afflicts me." He gestured dismissively. "You may examine me, though I warn you, my patience with healers has grown thin." Heart pounding, Lyra set her satchel on a nearby table and removed the tools of her trade. A small silver bowl, vials of various liquids, bundles of dried herbs. The routine actions helped steady her nerves. "Please sit," she instructed, momentarily forgetting she was addressing the Alpha King. Surprisingly, Draven complied, lowering himself into a chair beside the fire. The flames illuminated his features, highlighting both his beauty and the toll whatever affliction he suffered had taken. Lyra approached cautiously, her healer's instincts warring with the knowledge of who this man was and what he had done. "I will need to touch you," she explained, "to assess your energy pathways." Draven merely inclined his head in permission. Taking a deep breath, Lyra placed her fingertips against his wrist, feeling for the pulse that would tell her about his heart's rhythm and strength. The moment their skin connected, a jolt like lightning shot up her arm. Draven jerked back, his eyes widening. What was that? Lyra had felt it too, a surge of energy that seemed to flow between them, momentarily easing the ache in her chest. "I'm not certain," she admitted, her professional facade slipping. "May I try again?" After a moment's hesitation, Draven extended his arm. More cautiously this time, Lyra placed her fingers against his pulse point. The sensation was less shocking, but no less intense. A warm current flowing from him to her and back again, as if completing a circuit. Beneath her fingertips, his pulse raced, strong and vital despite his apparent weakness. "Your heartbeat is elevated," she observed, forcing herself to focus on the examination. but strong. This supports the theory that your condition isn't physically based. Then what is it? Draven demanded, though his voice lacked its earlier edge. Lyra released his wrist, needing to break the unsettling connection between them. I have several theories, but I'll need to conduct more tests. She moved to her satchel, creating distance between them. How long have you experienced symptoms? You've been told. Since the mating ceremony. And the specific symptoms? Draven's jaw clenched. Weakness, insomnia, pain without apparent cause. Where is the pain located? Lyra asked, mixing herbs in the silver bowl with practiced movements. His hand moved to his chest. Here. As if something essential is being pulled from me. Lyra nearly dropped the bowl. His description matched exactly the sensation she had been experiencing for the past year. And your mate? She asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. Has Queen Sarah experienced similar symptoms? Something dark flashed across Draven's face. You would have to ask her, though I doubt it. The bitterness in his tone spoke volumes. Whatever was happening between the Alpha King and his reluctant queen, it was clearly not a harmonious mating. I will need to examine her as well, Lyra said, seizing the opportunity. If this is related to your mating bond, there is no bond, Draven interrupted sharply. Not in the true sense. The ceremony was completed, but the bond never formed. This was unexpected information, and potentially significant. In werewolf lore, a mating ceremony without a true bond was like an empty vessel. The form existed, but the substance, the spiritual connection that should unite mates, was absent. I see, Lyra murmured, her mind racing. This may indeed be relevant to your condition. In rare cases, when a mating ceremony is performed, but the true bond fails to form, it can create an energy imbalance that manifests physically. It wasn't entirely a fabrication. Elena had once mentioned such cases, though they were exceedingly rare, and usually resulted in mild discomfort rather than debilitating illness. Draven leaned forward, sudden intensity in his gaze. You've seen this before? My mentor documented several such cases. Lyra hedged. The treatment is complex, but possible? The hope in his voice caught Lyra off guard. This was not the cold, calculating man who had humiliated her a year ago. This was someone genuinely suffering, desperate for relief. Something shifted inside her, a softening she hadn't expected and didn't welcome. Possible, yes, she said finally, but I will need regular access to both you and Queen Sarah over several days, and complete honesty about the circumstances of your mating. Draven's expression closed again. You'll have what you need, but understand this. Your presence here is to cure me, not to pry into matters of state or pack business. The implied threat was clear. Healer or not, she would be closely watched. Of course, Alpha King. Lyra bowed her head. I exist only to serve. The irony of her words wasn't lost on her. Here she stood, plotting against the very man she was promising to heal, all while experiencing inexplicable physical reactions to his presence. You'll be given quarters near the healing rooms, Draven said, rising from his chair with careful control that didn't quite hide his unsteadiness. Mara will see to your needs. We begin treatment at dawn tomorrow. He moved toward the door, clearly dismissing her, but paused before reaching it. Without turning, he asked, Your name? I don't believe you provided it. Lyra's breath caught. Lena, Your Majesty. I am called Lena. For a heartbeat, Draven remained motionless, as if testing the name in his mind. Then he nodded once and opened the door. Until dawn, Healer Lena. As Lyra gathered her supplies, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something far more complicated than a simple rescue mission. The Alpha King's condition, her own mysterious symptoms, the failed bond between Draven and Sarah, all pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet see in its entirety. And somewhere in this maze of stone and secrets was her sister, the final piece she needed to find. Dawn painted the stone walls of Blackthorn Fortress in hues of amber and gold as Lyra prepared for her first official day as the Alpha King's healer. She had spent a restless night in luxurious chambers that felt more like a gilded cage, her mind racing with questions. The mysterious connection she had felt when touching Draven, the way it seemed to momentarily ease the hollow ache she'd carried for a year, troubled her deeply, as did his revelation about the failed bond with Sarah. Such things were rare, but not unheard of. Usually they occurred when... Lyra shook the thought away. There were more pressing matters to address, starting with locating her sister. According to a servant who had delivered her breakfast, The Queen's quarters were in the east wing, as far from the Alpha King's chambers as the fortress architecture allowed, a telling detail about their relationship. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mara stood at the door, her expression unreadable as always. "The Alpha King awaits you in the private healing chamber," she announced. "Follow me." Lyra gathered her supplies, smoothed her healer's robe, and followed the Beta through the winding corridors. Pack members they passed bowed respectfully to Mara, while casting curious glances at Lyra. Word of the new healer had clearly spread. "Has there been any change in his condition?" Lyra asked carefully. Mara's pace didn't falter. "He rested better last night than he has in weeks. He attributes it to hope that your treatments might succeed where others have failed." Lyra felt a twinge of guilt. She had come to this fortress with ulterior motives, to find Sarah, not to heal Draven. Yet the healer in her couldn't ignore his genuine suffering. "Before we begin treatment," Lyra said, "I must emphasize that I need to examine Queen Sarah as well. If the Alpha King's condition is related to their incomplete bond, her energy patterns are equally important." Mara's lips thinned slightly. "The Queen has been informed of your request. She has agreed to meet with you after your session with the Alpha King." The healing chamber turned out to be a circular room deep within the fortress, its walls lined with shelves of herbs and medicines. A large window allowed natural light to spill across a central table designed for examinations. The space had the same austere functionality as Draven's private quarters, but with an almost sacred quality to it. Draven himself stood by the window, his powerful silhouette outlined against the morning light. He turned as they entered, and Lyra was struck again by the contradictions in his appearance. Still every inch the powerful Alpha King, yet carrying a new vulnerability in the shadows beneath his eyes, and the carefully controlled way he moved. "Leave us," he commanded Mara without preamble. The Beta hesitated only briefly before bowing and exiting, closing the heavy door behind her. "You look troubled, healer," Draven observed, his penetrating gaze making Lyra feel exposed despite her careful composure. "I'm considering treatment approaches, Your Majesty." "Are you?" A hint of his former coldness crept into his voice. "Or are you reconsidering your ability to cure what ails me?" Lyra lifted her chin. "I never promised a cure, only my best efforts to understand and treat your condition." Surprisingly, this frank response seemed to please him. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Honesty, a rare commodity in these halls. He moved to the examination table and seated himself. "Proceed with your assessment." Over the next hour, Lyra conducted a thorough examination, checking his physical vitals while surreptitiously observing his energy patterns using the techniques Elena had taught her. Each time she made contact with his skin, that same strange connection flared between them, a warm current that seemed to temporarily strengthen them both. Draven noticed it too. After she checked his pulse for the third time, he caught her wrist, preventing her from pulling away. "What is that sensation?" he demanded quietly. "The energy that passes between us." Lyra's heart raced, both from the question and from his touch. "I'm not certain," she admitted. "It's unusual. It eases the pain," he said, his silver eyes searching her face. "Temporarily, at least." She nodded, unable to deny it. "For me as well." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean, for you as well? You experience pain similar to mine?" Lyra realized her mistake too late. In her distraction, she had revealed more than intended. "As a healer, I sometimes mirror symptoms to better understand them," she improvised, gently extracting her wrist from his grip. "It's a technique Elena taught me." Draven didn't look convinced, but didn't press the issue. "And what have your techniques revealed so far?" "Your condition appears to be connected to your life force energy," she explained, falling back on her legitimate healer training. "There's a disruption in your spirit's natural flow, as if something is pulling energy from you constantly. Can it be fixed?" The naked hope in his question caught her off guard. For the first time, she saw past the Alpha King to the man beneath, one suffering and desperate for relief. "That depends on its cause," she hedged, mixing herbs in a small bowl. "Which is why I need to examine Queen Sarah as well. If the issue stems from the incomplete mating bond, understanding both sides will be crucial." Draven's expression darkened at the mention of Sarah. "She has agreed to meet with you, though I doubt she'll be cooperative. My queen has made an art form of resistance." The bitterness in his tone sparked Lyra's curiosity. "May I ask, why her? If the bond never formed properly, surely—" "You overstep, healer," Draven cut her off, though without real anger. After a moment, he sighed. But I suppose understanding the situation may help your treatment. He rose from the table, moving to stand by the window again, his back to her. The arrangement with Sarah was political. Her father and I had an agreement. When she fled rather than honor it, I saw it as both personal and political betrayal. So taking her as your queen was punishment, Lyra concluded, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Draven turned, his expression hardening. It was enforcement of a contract. Pack law is clear. Blood oaths cannot be broken without consequences. Even if it meant forcing someone into a loveless mating, love has nothing to do with pack alliances. He stepped closer, his presence suddenly intimidating despite his weakened state. You speak very freely for someone who only arrived yesterday. Lyra forced herself to stand her ground. A healer must understand all aspects of a patient's condition, physical, emotional, and spiritual, especially when treating soul sickness. For several tense heartbeats, Draven studied her, his silver eyes seeming to search for something in her face. Finally, he nodded once. Finish your preparation, he said. I have matters to attend to. We'll continue this afternoon. Before Lyra could respond, he strode from the room, moving with the careful control of someone fighting against physical weakness. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The encounter had left her shaken, not just from the tension, but from the confusing mix of emotions Draven stirred in her. Anger at what he'd done to Sarah, professional concern for his condition, and something else she refused to name. But now, she had a more immediate concern. With Draven gone, this might be her best chance to find Sarah. The Queen's wing was noticeably quieter than the rest of the fortress, with fewer guards and servants. Lyra followed the directions Mara had reluctantly provided, aware of curious eyes following her progress. As the new healer, her presence wasn't questioned, but she sensed she was being observed nonetheless. The doors to Sarah's chambers were surprisingly plain compared to the ornate entrance to Draven's quarters. A single guard stood watch, his expression impassive. Healer Lena to see the Queen, Lyra announced, projecting professional confidence. The guard nodded once and knocked on the door. After a moment, it opened to reveal a petite woman with auburn hair who assessed Lyra with wary eyes. The Queen is resting, she said. The Alpha King has ordered this examination, Lyra replied steadily. The woman's lips thinned, but she stepped aside, allowing Lyra to enter. The Queen's chambers were surprisingly welcoming, filled with light from large windows, decorated with tapestries and comfortable furniture. It felt more like a home than Draven's austere quarters. Sarah herself stood by a window, her back to the door. Even from behind, Lyra recognized her sister instantly, despite the 5 years that had passed since they'd last truly been together. Sarah's dark hair, once cut short, had grown past her shoulders, and she wore a simple dress of deep green rather than the elaborate gowns Lyra would have expected for a queen. Leave us, Nadia, Sarah said without turning. The attendant hesitated, then bowed and exited, closing the door behind her. For a moment, silence hung between them. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs, 1,000 words crowding her throat, yet none making it past her lips. Finally, Sarah turned. Her face, so like Lyra's own, was thinner than Lyra remembered, with new lines around her eyes that spoke of hardship, but her gaze was as direct and unflinching as ever. So, she said, her voice carefully neutral, you're the new healer sent to fix the great Alpha King. Lyra stepped forward, searching her sister's face for any sign of recognition. Sarah, don't. Sarah raised a hand, stopping her. These rooms are likely monitored. Whatever you've come to do, maintain your cover. So Sarah had recognized her instantly. Relief flooded through Lyra, followed quickly by concern. If Sarah was warning about surveillance, the situation was even more dangerous than she'd anticipated. I'm here to examine you as part of the Alpha King's treatment, Lyra said loudly for any listening ears. Then, more softly, are you harmed? Sarah moved to a small table, gesturing for Lyra to join her. No, she murmured. Not physically, at least. Her eyes conveyed what her words couldn't, the psychological toll of her captivity. Lyra opened her healer's satchel, arranging herbs and instruments on the table to maintain the pretense of an examination, while they spoke in hushed tones. I've been trying to find a way to help you for a year, Lyra whispered, emotion thickening her voice. I never thought it would be like this. Why are you here, Lyra? Sarah asked, tension evident in her rigid posture. Do you know how dangerous this is for both of us? I came to get you out, Lyra admitted, to find a way to free you from this forced mating. Sarah's expression hardened. And how exactly do you plan to accomplish that, even if we manage to escape the fortress? Which is virtually impossible. The mating is legally binding. Draven could hunt us to the ends of the earth. There must be a way, Lyra insisted. The bond between you never fully formed. That might provide grounds for dissolution. Something flashed in Sarah's eyes. A complex emotion Lyra couldn't quite interpret. How do you know about the bond? Draven told me. He believes it's connected to his illness. Sarah leaned back, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. And is it? I'm not sure yet. Lyra hesitated, then added, but I think it might be connected to something else entirely. What do you mean? Lyra took a deep breath. Since the ceremony last year, I've experienced symptoms, a hollow ache in my chest that grows stronger the closer I get to Draven. And when I touch him, there's an energy exchange that temporarily relieves both his pain and mine. Sarah stared at her, shock slowly giving way to something like realization. Lyra, she said carefully, when exactly did these symptoms start? The night of the ceremony, after Draven rejected me and took you instead. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, as if pained. Oh, goddess, it makes sense now. What makes sense? Why the bond between Draven and me never formed. Sarah leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. Lyra, a true mating bond can't be forced. It only forms between true mates, those the goddess has destined for each other. I know that, Lyra said, confusion clear in her tone. But what does that have to do with everything? Sarah interrupted. It has everything to do with why Draven is ill, why you're experiencing the same symptoms, and why I've never felt the pull of a mate bond with him. She gripped Lyra's hands tightly. Think, sister. What if Draven rejected his true mate that night? The implication hit Lyra like a physical blow. That's impossible, she whispered. I would have known. I would have felt something when we met. Not necessarily, Sarah countered. You were terrified, focused on your duty to the pack, and Draven was consumed with anger over my escape years before. Neither of you was open to recognizing the bond. Lyra shook her head in denial, yet even as she did, pieces began falling into place. The hollow ache that had plagued her for a year, a symptom documented in separated true mates. The surge of energy when she touched Draven, the way his condition had begun, precisely when they parted. This can't be, she said weakly. After what he did to you, to me, I'm not defending his actions, Sarah said quickly. What he did was cruel and wrong, but if what I suspect is true, you're both suffering from a severed mate bond. Lyra felt dizzy with the implications. Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, what does it change? He took you as his queen. The political alliance is already in place. Sarah's expression shifted, determination replacing caution. It changes everything, Lyra. A true mate bond supersedes all other pact claims, even political alliances. It's one of our oldest laws. You think he would release you if he knew? I think he might not have a choice. Sarah squeezed Lyra's hands. But we need to be certain before making any moves. The Alpha King is not known for his forgiveness or flexibility. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah quickly released Lyra's hands and raised her voice. I assure you, healer, I am in perfect health. Whatever ails the Alpha King is his burden alone. And the door opened, revealing Mara, her sharp gaze moving between them suspiciously. The Alpha King requires the healer's presence, she announced. Lyra gathered her supplies, her mind reeling from the conversation. We'll continue this examination another time, Your Majesty, she said formally. Sarah merely nodded, her eyes conveying a silent message. Be careful. The next 3 days passed in a blur of examinations, treatments, and clandestine meetings with Sarah. Under the guise of healing sessions, Lyra worked to unravel the truth of her connection to Draven, while seeking a way to free her sister. Draven's condition seemed to stabilize somewhat under her care, particularly when her treatments involved direct contact. Each touch between them strengthened the theory that Sarah had proposed, though Lyra fought against accepting it. How could the man who had humiliated her and imprisoned her sister possibly be her true mate? Yet the evidence mounted. During one treatment, when she had maintained contact with his wrist for several minutes, Lyra had experienced a brief flash of his emotions: frustration, confusion, and a bone-deep loneliness that mirrored her own. The connection had startled them both, causing Draven to pull away abruptly. "What was that?" he had demanded, silver eyes wide. "I'm not certain," Lyra had answered truthfully, "but I believe it's significant to your condition." Now, on the fourth night of her stay, Lyra paced her chambers, torn between conflicting loyalties and desires. She had come to Blackthorn Fortress to rescue Sarah, but her sister's revelation had complicated everything. If Draven truly was her mate, attempting to leave would only worsen the soul sickness for both of them. Yet how could she possibly accept such a bond? How could she forgive what he had done? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Expecting Mara with another summons, Lyra was surprised to find Sarah at her door, a hooded cloak obscuring her features. "We need to talk," Sarah whispered, slipping inside. "Privately." Lyra quickly closed the door. "How did you get here without being seen?" "I know ways around the fortress that even Draven doesn't." Sarah pushed back her hood, her expression urgent. "I've been thinking about your situation." "My situation?" "Your bond with Draven." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, motioning for Lyra to join her. "I've been observing him since you arrived. He's different with you. Less guarded, less cold." Lyra sank down beside her sister. "Even if what you suspect is true, it doesn't erase what he did." "No, it doesn't." Sarah's expression softened. "But I've had a year to observe Draven Blackthorn, to understand what drives him. His cruelty stems from pain, Lyra. When I fled my obligation to him years ago, it reinforced his belief that everyone eventually betrays him. That doesn't excuse taking you by force." "No, it doesn't," Sarah agreed. "But I'm not without blame either. I ran from my responsibilities, leaving you to bear the consequences." Lyra shook her head. "You were young. You wanted freedom. And now I want it for both of us." Sarah took her hands. "Tomorrow morning, I'm going to confront Draven with the truth, that you are his true mate, not me." Alarm shot through Lyra. "Sarah, no. It's too dangerous. If he reacts badly, he won't," Sarah said with surprising confidence. "Not once he understands what's at stake. His pride might be wounded, but his wolf will recognize the truth." She squeezed Lyra's hands. "Besides, I have leverage he can't ignore." "What leverage?" A small, fierce smile curved Sarah's lips. "I've discovered something in the ancient pack archives, a ritual that can dissolve a mating that hasn't been consummated. Our mating exists only on paper and ceremony. It can be undone." Hope flared in Lyra's chest, quickly tempered by caution. "Even if that's true, Draven agreed to this alliance for political reasons. The Moonstone Treaty can be renegotiated with you as his queen," Sarah finished. "A stronger bond than a forced mating could ever be." She stood, drawing her cloak around her shoulders again. "Trust me, sister. This may be our best chance for both of us to find peace." After Sarah left, Lyra remained awake long into the night, turning over possibilities in her mind. The thought of confronting Draven with the truth terrified her, not just because of how he might react, but because of what it would mean to acknowledge the bond between them. Yet, as dawn approached, a strange calm settled over her. Whatever happened next, the time for hiding was over. Lyra was summoned to Draven's private quarters earlier than usual the next morning. Her heart pounded as she was escorted through the fortress, wondering if Sarah had already spoken to him. The guards at his door seemed tenser than normal, and when she entered, she immediately sensed something had changed. Draven stood by the window, his posture rigid, hands clasped behind his back. When he turned to face her, his expression was thunderous. "Leave us," he commanded the guards, who quickly withdrew, closing the door behind them. For several heartbeats, silence stretched between them. Lyra's throat went dry under his intense scrutiny. "Alpha King," she began, struggling to maintain her healer's composure. "You summoned me?" "I did." His voice was dangerously soft. "I had an interesting conversation with my queen this morning, so Sarah had gone through with it." Lyra lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. "About?" "About you." Draven moved toward her with predatory grace. "Or should I say, about Lyra Moonstone?" Her heart stuttered. "Your Majesty." "No more lies," he growled, stopping just inches from her. "Is it true? Are you Lyra?" There was no point denying it now. "Yes." Anger flashed in his eyes, quickly masked. "You've been deceiving me for days." "I came to help my sister," Lyra replied, refusing to back down. "The sister you took against her will, and yet you stayed to heal me," Draven countered. Why? The question caught her off guard. Why had she continued the treatments once she'd found Sarah? She could have fled with her sister at any point. I took an oath as a healer, she said finally. To do no harm. Noble, Draven said, skepticism clear in his tone, but incomplete. He moved closer still, his scent enveloping her, making the hollow ache in her chest pulse with renewed intensity. Sarah told me something else, he continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Something about true mates and severed bonds. Lyra's breath caught. And do you believe her? I believe there is something between us that defies explanation. His silver eyes searched her face. I felt it since the moment you arrived. This pull, this connection that eases the pain I've carried for a year. That doesn't mean... Look at me, Lyra, he commanded softly. Really look. What do you feel? She wanted to deny it, to reject the very possibility. But as she met his gaze, the truth rose unbidden within her, a recognition so deep and primal it transcended logic or past grievances. I feel completion, she whispered. The words dragged from somewhere deep within her soul, as if a part of me that's been missing has been found. Something in Draven's expression shifted, the hardness giving way to vulnerability she would never have believed him capable of. I felt it that night, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. When I first saw you walking toward the ceremonial stone, but I was so consumed with anger at Sarah's betrayal, so determined to enforce the original contract. You rejected me, Lyra finished, and took my sister instead, a decision I've paid for every day since. He stepped back, running a hand through his dark hair. The pain began that very night, this hollowness that no healer could cure. Because you rejected your true mate, Lyra said softly, and I walked away. Understanding passed between them. The recognition of how their choices had led to mutual suffering. Where does this leave us? Lyra asked finally. You're mated to my sister. In ceremony only, Draven replied. Sarah has found an ancient ritual to dissolve a non-consummated mating. If it works, he left the implication hanging between them. And if it doesn't, Lyra challenged. Will you keep her prisoner for the rest of her life? Draven's expression hardened. I am not the monster you believe me to be, Lyra. I've never harmed Sarah, despite her numerous escape attempts, and I never would, regardless of our personal situation. Then prove it, Lyra said. Release her. Let her go free, whether this ritual works or not. And the alliance between our packs can be maintained through a true mating bond, she replied, hardly believing the words coming from her own mouth. If that's what we both choose. Something like hope flickered in Draven's eyes. And is that what you would choose, Lyra Moonstone? To accept a bond with the man who rejected you? It was the question she'd been avoiding since Sarah first suggested the possibility. Could she forgive? Could she move past the hurt and humiliation to embrace what lay between them? The answer came not from her mind, but from her heart, from the wolf within her that recognized its mate despite all logic and past grievance. I would choose healing over hatred, she said finally, for both of us. Draven moved toward her again, slowly this time, giving her every opportunity to retreat. When she remained in place, he reached out, his fingertips brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. The connection flared between them, stronger than before, not just easing pain, but filling the hollow spaces with warmth and recognition. I have much to atone for, he murmured. Much to earn. Yes, Lyra agreed. You do. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Beginning with freeing your sister and asking your forgiveness, and ending with a new kind of alliance, Lyra said. One built on choice rather than coercion. As Draven's hand moved to cup her cheek fully, Lyra felt the fractured pieces within her begin to heal, not miraculously or completely, but with the promise of wholeness to come. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Trust would need to be rebuilt, wounds acknowledged and healed. But as the morning light spilled through the windows of Blackthorn Fortress, illuminating two souls finally finding their way to each other, Lyra knew one thing with certainty. Some bonds, once recognized, could never truly be broken. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.